So just to feel the room before I start, how many people use inline linting or use inline syntax checking?
Syntax checking, yes.
Okay, so there is at least one person in the room who this will be useful. So I have no slides. I am going to tell a story and then work from there. So I started using computers back in about, what would it have been, 1994. We got our first computer, and it ran Windows 3.11. And is this VM going to start? Oh yeah, when you ran Windows 3.11, you couldn't leave a disk in the drive when you booted it up. So I need to eject the disk image and try again. And eventually it boots into DOS, and I type win to take me into Windows. And the machine we bought came with a copy of Microsoft Works. If you've not heard of Microsoft Works, be happy. It was miserable software to use. It was Microsoft Office, but condensed into one executable for people who couldn't afford the whole thing. And it was about 6 versions behind the features in Office at any given time. But it's what we had, so we used it. I don't want a guided tour, and I want to create a word processing document. And I would like to type some things into it. You can see my typing is not perfect there. And if I ask it, it will tell me that. But it doesn't tell me that straight away. I have to go to Tools, Spelling. I have to tell it to start again from the beginning, because I've told it to check the spelling, but it doesn't really want to check the spelling. And now I go through change by change and say, okay, it can't work out what I meant there. So I have to change it manually. And something. And then I have to delete that, but I can't change it to be deleted, so I have to cancel it. So the Spellcheck experience in Microsoft Works and in 1994 was not great, is what we take from this so far. And then I have to press my host key to get out so that I can shut down this VM. I mean, in principle, if you want to do it properly, then you'd quit that, then you'd quit Program Manager, which quits Windows, then you're back in DOS. Then there's no shutdown command, so you can just turn the power off. So then, in 1998, I started secondary school, and I'm going to cheat here. I'm running Windows 98 because getting a Windows 95 VM is basically impossible. Or at least my experience. It took longer than an hour, so I gave up, because longer than an hour is more than I want to spend on this talk. So I'm going to cheat and use Windows 98.
So, do you have any insight into why it's so hard to do 95?
It's something to do with the virtualization features and the features that you get on modern CPUs. I think it's more modern CPUs. I think if you try and use even like a Pentium 4 or something with Windows 95, it breaks unless you use certain specific versions of it with certain patches on it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not 1998 anymore, so I couldn't find them. So yeah, I'm cheating and using Windows 98, but that's fine because that's what I had on my home computer at the time. But I went to secondary school, and there they had Microsoft Word. They had Microsoft Word 97. And so I can go to Start Programs, Microsoft Word. And of course it comes with Clippy, everyone's favourite animated paperclip. And so if I start typing into this window, then make spelling mistake, this magical feature was introduced in the year 1997. Word looks for spelling mistakes as I'm typing and puts them right on the document, so I don't have to do this whole rigmarole of going through every possible mistake in a document and doing it as a post-processing step once I finish typing. I can check my spelling and I can correct it. Actually, deliberately making minor typos when you're typing live like this is hard, but you can see, okay, I need to fix that. and that's not a word. But it's a far more fluid process than was the case in Microsoft Works, where you had to do it after the fact. If you want to, you can still go to Tools, Spelling and Grammar and go through element by element, but you don't have to. So hopefully you can see where I'm going with this. No, I don't want to save that. So around the same time, I started programming. I started programming using Visual Basic 6, which is here. And let's make a standard exe, and let's just open up a subroutine that will run when the form loads, because it's easy to generate. So I can say A equals 1, B equals, or N equals 5. That's fine. I can do that. That shouldn't work. So although we had the technology in Word, we didn't yet have the technology in Visual Basic, or in Visual Studio in general, in programming. You have to compile it, and then you get a compile error, and it says, okay, it's not defined. It does go and helpfully highlight the bit that's not working, but you don't get the inline syntax highlighting that you do in Microsoft Word. So I'm going to fast forward again, and I should be able to shut down this. Windows is shutting down. Oh yeah, I think this VM has a bug where it doesn't shut down properly, it just hangs at that screen forever. So let's do that. So a few years later, I started interacting more with Microsoft. I got a copy of Windows XP out of them, and a copy of Visual Studio.net. Turns out Visual Studio.net, the original version, is basically impossible to find, so I'm going to cheat and use Visual Studio.net 2003. They were released a year apart, so it's not a big deal. Windows is not activated. Okay, so I'm going to run Visual Studio.net 2003, and I'm going to create a new Visual Basic project. It can be a Windows application. Same thing as I was doing in Visual Basic 6. I'm going to start typing some stuff. And magic, 2003, we've moved on 5 years, and we now have blue squiggly underlines telling us there's a syntax error. And you can see that name is not declared, so I need to fix that. It doesn't have the same suggestions on how to fix it that you do in Word, but it's at least useful. So at that point, I went to university, and I'm just going to power that off. I'm not going to bother shutting it down because it's getting boring at this point. And there I started learning the C programming language, and we were using Max with Xcode. And here also, it takes longer to give it to you, but you have the same thing. It won't squiggly underline it, but it will still tell you that there's a syntax error that you need to fix. And so then I graduated from my degree and started programming for high-performance computing, where normally you will write some code on your local machine, then compile it on the cluster, and you'll write it using DOM text editors, or maybe some smart text editors. So I've got some Fortran code here. The cycle that you'll normally do is, okay, I'll compile it, and then I'll go back to my editor that's running in a separate window and try and fix them one by one and go back and forth between them. At least that's what I did until about 3 months ago. And that is a miserable thing to do. So I decided there must be a better way. I quoted Raymond Hettinger and said there must be a better way that surely someone has achieved in the year of Luigi +4 what Microsoft had achieved back in 1998 for word processors and in 2002 for code. And turns out they had. I just haven't found it yet. And so I discovered, I'm an Emacs user, and I discovered this thing called Spellcheck. So Spellcheck is not enabled by default in Emacs, which was why I hadn't discovered it automatically. And this is my complaint about using a text editor for programming, is that it takes so long to discover everything that you need to do to make it feel nice. It's one of the big strong points of configurable text editors is that they're massively configurable and you can do whatever you want. But starting with them, knowing what you want is a challenge, because you just don't know what's available. So now this is using G-Fortran, and it's trying to compile this open source code I downloaded earlier today, and it's giving me all of my Fortran errors in situ, rather than this huge mess that I had at the command line. I can't right-click and get suggestions because we're not at that stage yet, but I can at least, you can see down the bottom of the screen what the error is at each point, and then I can start trying to fix them. So it turns out tabs aren't supported in Fortran. So you just need to, actually if I just press tab, yeah, that will automatically re-indent that.
To do with punch cards.
This is a .f90 file. Yeah, so this is a .f90 file, so it's freeform Fortran. So it's in 1990, the Fortran standard tried to liberate everyone from the limitations of punch cards, and everyone held on desperately to their punch card formatting anyway. But no, this is a .f90 file, so it's not limited by punch card formatting. So I can just go and say indent subprogram, and then it'll go and automatically re-indent everything. It'll still have the same errors, but it won't have the same warnings. So you can see there's this extension *8 that on code I've worked with I've now gone through and fixed because I've had all these warnings jumping out at me. So another thing you can do, so this is workflow with a compiled language, but you're not limited to compiled languages. You also have things called, well, in the case of Python, you have a program called pylint. So I'm going to switch window to over here to a piece of Python code I wrote a while back. I run pylint on it, and I get a long list of problems with my Python code because I didn't use inline linting when I was writing it for the first time. So I can go and open this file, so ph210, and that is generate timetable.py. And you can see it highlights all of my warnings in line. Or it highlights some of them because I don't think the number is quite the same as over here, because at the moment this is using a different linter. So this is, I think this is probably using Flake 8, and I was using pylint over here. What I can do is I can go to Tools, Syntax Checking, check, no, not check concurrent buffer, Tools, Syntax Checking, select Syntax Checker, and I can type Python, and I want pylint. And now I get a bunch more errors because pylint's a lot more picky about what you put in your code. So, yeah, the experience of writing new code with a linter enabled is amazing, because you open up an old file and you see all these errors, and it's really overwhelming that I can't go through and fix all these errors because it's going to break my entire application. But if you start a new project like that, as soon as you write a line, you see that, oh, this line isn't conforming. This line has an error on it. Okay, let's fix my style on this line. And you go through, and everything is written according to standards, and it's really nice to read. So just having someone a little angel standing on your shoulder, occasionally prodding at you, saying, "No, don't do it like that. Do it nicely," and then you end up with nice code, which is nice. Oops, cancel. So there are a couple of problems that I've encountered using this. So one of them is that when you use Fortran, you don't define interfaces in header files. You define them in modules in your normal code, and then when those get compiled, they generate module files that contain the interface. Those are compiler specific, so if you're using a compiler other than G-Fortran, then G-Fortran run by Spellcheck can't read the module files that are in your working directory. So then you have to you either have to recompile the entire thing with gfortran or live without a linter. Or you do what I did, and write your own interface to do the linting, or to read the output from ifort. So I'm just going to log into my Surface downstairs that has Intel and NAG compilers installed. In the meantime, I can open up the repository where I've shared this code. So it's surprisingly easy to do. I mean, it looks quite long, but 80 to 90% of this is just identical to the code that's there for gfortran. So you can look up the Spellcheck repository and pull out all the stuff that mentions gfortran. You go through and replace gfortran with the name of the compiler you're targeting. And the things you have to change are things like this, where the parameters are slightly different. And then down here, where it actually calls the command. You need to tell it which command to use. So I'm going to use the NAG compiler, and you tell it, you've got this, this kind of syntax here. This is the main crux of it, is how you pass the output. So it's built on top of Emacs regexes, and you tell it, okay, this thing is an error. At the start of a line, you'll see error, then the file name. It can pull that out, the line number, and so on. And so it can pull all that out. And so how's Cortana loaded yet? So when I run nag4, you can see it doesn't give me the column number. So if I were to use this linter in Spellcheck, it wouldn't be able to highlight the exact error on the line because it doesn't know where it is. It can only highlight the entire line. If we try to use ifort, things get more interesting because ifort knows the column number, but it won't give it to you. ifort will only give you this little arrow here pointing to where the error is. And I don't know enough Emacs Lisp. If someone would give a talk about Emacs Lisp so that I could learn how to do this, it would make this repository far more simple. But at the moment, I don't know enough Emacs Lisp to be able to pull that out. So what I do instead is, if I go back, I use a shell script called ifortwrap. No, I didn't want commits. I just want the actual contents of that file, please. There we go. So it is a tiny shell script that calls ifort, then replaces things that look like arrows with the length of that line. And then my actual checker for ifort will then, it will call ifortwrap, and then it will look for the column number on the third line of output for each error, which works. And I don't have ifort installed on this machine, so I can't show you the output of that, but it works just fine. I use it on multiple machines now. And yeah, as you might have guessed from the way I'm in a browser, this is available on GitHub at Bennett/Spellcheck-ifort if you are a NAG Fortran or ifort user and want to use Spellcheck. So it's worth pointing out, I've been talking exclusively about Emacs so far because I am an Emacs user, but this technology is not restricted to Emacs. Emacs are not the only people to have worked out that what Microsoft did in 1997 for Word was a good idea for programming. So Vim has an extension called Syntastic. It can't do squiggly underlines because you're in a terminal, but it can give you pointers on the left-hand side to where there are errors. And apparently when you hover over it, it can actually give you tooltips. I didn't realize Vim could do that. Oh, this is gvim.
Gvim.
Yeah. I'm not a Vim user, so. But yeah, so these things exist for Vim. They also exist for Sublime. If you use Sublime Text, it's called Sublime Linter. It also has a set of built-in linters. And also, if you use Atom, then you can use atom linter that has all of these languages covered. And I think that's about all I wanted to say. So my concluding message is, if you aren't using inline linting and inline syntax highlighting, not syntax highlighting, inline error checking, then do, because it makes your life so much better. And it makes you so much more productive, and I wish I'd done it 5 years ago or 10 years ago. So yeah, let's chat more about linters or something else. Thank you.